Hey you guys, John Michael Weaver here. Today I want to share with you guys a great video interview with Jonathan Malm, the creator of ChurchStageDesignIdeas.com and a few other great places with some really helpful content. He's going to share with us on a lot of things when it comes to creating church environments that are relevant and inviting. And so I'm really looking forward to this. Did want to mention again, we've got a little bit of video issues. There's some frame rate problems, but the audio is great. What he has to say is very valuable. So I hope that you find this interview to be useful for your process. So today we have the privilege of talking with Jonathan Malm from ChurchStageDesignIdeas.com. You have a few other websites as well, and we'll talk about that through the course of our conversation today. But just really appreciate Jonathan's time and sharing with us about creating creative experiences and creative environments in the church world today. So Jonathan, just let us know a little bit about who you are and what your process has been to come to where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, I started kind of as obviously in a youth group, started there learning how to lead worship and how to run sound and all that good stuff. Then sort of made my way up the ranks to a big church, if you will. Started kind of doing sort of everything there. And we were actually an Assemblies of God church in the process of kind of modernizing. We were 50 years old. So everyone in town in Corpus Christi, Texas had been to the church, but we were no longer really that church anymore. So, we were trying to rebrand, trying to update this sanctuary from the 70s. So I kind of got this idea to do stage design, which I didn't really know that was a thing. I didn't know the churches did that much. I think I'd gone to a passion conference and seen something that looked cool, but it wasn't a stage design, it was just projection or something. But so I didn't know what to do. I looked online, didn't really find anything, just kind of wung it. What's the past tense of wing?
Something like that.
Yeah. And just kind of, we built these kind of structures out of steel and spandex and had this welder. It was just this really involved process, and got some LED lighting, which was pretty, not too new, but a little bit new at the time. Sure. And so I was starting to blog at the time, started blogging about that stage design, and then we started updating a few things, did a few things differently. And I realized that people were really actually looking for this information. I wasn't the only one doing this. So I started this website, just kind of publicly researching, trying to figure out more about it. Again, I was kind of doing worship and tech and graphic design and video and web and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, this wasn't my sole focus, but it was kind of a pet project for me. And I started realizing there are a ton of churches trying to figure this stuff out. And the site's just been growing, and more people have been submitting their work. And it's just kind of been this community, ChurchStageDesignIdeas.com. It's just been kind of fun to be part of it. And a few years ago, I had the opportunity to do that full time along with some of my other websites. My wife was going to try to go to school, and we had to leave the city. So the option was to either get another job at a church or elsewhere, or try to do these full time through advertisers and stuff like that. And so made the leap, and that's where I am now. I got a chance to write a couple of books and direct a conference for a brief season, and just been really enjoying kind of being an entrepreneur, if you will, with this kind of space. So
that's great.
That's my story. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, kind of consider you, I've heard the word out there too, in another interview, a thought leader, or someone who's really leading the way in the kind of the dimensions of the creatives, and they hear this word creative or makers, and especially in this generation. And no, it's just really cool to see what is happening in this kind of community of churches going, hey, it's not just about what we accomplish, but helping others accomplish it. And that's, it's just knowledge becoming available out there. And so, recently you wrote your book, Creative for More. I got one here. I'm pretty excited to go through it myself, and got one I'm giving away, and I'm going to be handing off some to some of our other tech guys and stuff as well. But talk to us a little bit about the book. Where was it birthed from, and what does it mean to you, and what are you excited about with it?
Yeah, I've had the chance to be a part of kind of some groups of, graphic designers and kind of the creative people in the church. And it's funny because a lot of them feel really far away from God, even though they devote so much of their time to working in the church and to designing. And, it's ministry, but they feel kind of separated from their creator, which I don't think should be the case. I think, this whole creative process, the idea, the act of creating, is something that is very, very, very part and parcel with God. I mean, God created us to be creative beings. When we create, we get to share in His creation. We get to show others what He's created and show and kind of take part in that. So that was kind of my goal, is just to make it, first of all, a devotional that people could actually finish, because I don't know about you, but I rarely actually finish a devotional.
Right.
And then just kind of one that actually speaks to the creative nature inside people, which I don't think you even have to be creative to go through it. I think we're all born creative. Then, teachers tell us we aren't creative anymore. So the goal is to kind of rebirth that creativity in people, and also connect those kind of creative thoughts and creative ideas to our walk with God, and kind of make it all one cohesive package that, it's not our creative life and our spiritual life separate. It's all together. So that was kind of the goal of the book, and hope I accomplished it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's great, man. That's exciting. So what's driving you right now? What's exciting you? Obviously, the book is kind of like your baby in some ways. It's like you're birthing all this stuff that's been in there for some time now. And so what's next? Where are you going? What are you excited about?
Man, I just love writing. That's what I'm really focusing on. I'm writing kind of two books at the same time right now. One's kind of a co-writing project I'm doing with a guy from North Point Ministries. He's their guest services guy, and we're kind of writing this 10 best practices of guest services, which is really exciting. And then there's another one that I'm writing that's kind of about how to discover your unique identity. I think it's really easy to compare ourselves with other people and say, oh, I'm like that person, or, oh, I want to be like that person. And we kind of miss out on what God has uniquely created for us. So that's kind of the idea. It's a little bit creative, but that's not really necessarily the big thrust of it. It's more just for anyone who kind of wants to be unique, which I think we all have that desire. But actually being unique is something difficult to do.
That's true.
So that's kind of what's driving me. And I love just trying new things, new projects. I volunteer at my church here. It's a church plant, only 5 years old. Not a church plant, but it's a new church, only five years old. But we've actually, I think Easter we were at 800 people, which is crazy. Like we don't even have the space for that many people. It's been crazy. So it's been fun to just be part of kind of helping another church grow and getting to navigate all the tensions. Because it's funny, like you go to a large church and they've kind of gone through a lot of the stuff that, I mean, every church kind of goes through the same things, but it's just been fun to be back at that kind of birth stage again and see like, figuring out that, just because a guy works somewhere that, he should know something doesn't mean he does know something. And that, I think that's a requirement for everyone to go through, that like, oh, just because this person works at Guitar Center doesn't mean they are the end all about guitars or about sound systems. So it's kind of interesting.
That's great, man. Being in a place where, you're serving in a volunteer role in ways and serving the church without any kind of expectations sometimes. I love that. I think, the church really does rise and fall on our volunteers. And, I love it. I love it.
What's crazy is if you think about it, like I think the stat is that people make the decision whether or not to come back to a church in the first 5 minutes. And so what that means is in the first 5 minutes, people see, maybe like a parking lot team or the children's ministry volunteers or the greeters. Like every single person in those first 5 minutes are volunteers.
Totally.
Like before the pastor, I mean, the person who's paid to get people to come back, he has no impact really on the situation.
That's huge.
Yeah, volunteers are massive. It's such a huge thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're talking about creative experiences, creative environments. Really, I think the biggest question that a lot of churches are asking is why? Why is it important? Why do we need to create, these kinds of environments? Why, and we can talk about stage design specifically in that, but why is the environment important to the experience that people come through the church doors?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tool, creating a stage design and all that stuff. It's one tool in your arsenal of creativity. I think the bigger importance is creativity is important, which you see that in Jesus. Creativity is one another tool of creativity is storytelling, and that's what Jesus was the master of. There's this kind of part in our brain called Broca, and what that does, that part of our brain actually filters things that we've seen before. So imagine if I'm looking at my room, there are probably 1,000 individual items in this room. And if I was always analyzing each one of those items, my brain would just be exhausted. So what Broca does is it says, oh, I've seen that before. I don't need to process that information, right? But what creativity does is creativity kind of, it shocks Broca. Like it says, whoa, wait, I've never seen that before. And all of a sudden your brain is required to process what you're seeing or what you're hearing or what you're feeling, tasting, all that stuff. So creativity allows us to kind of get past that filtering system and people can listen to it in a new way. So that's why sometimes, you'll hear a story, and all of a sudden it impacts you. You learn something that you've heard 1,000 times, but that story or that song all of a sudden made it really resonate in your heart.
Right.
And that's our goal. Is, we live in a very distracted society where broca is just like, don't let anything in. And our goal is to obviously get past that and really reach into people's hearts and kind of impact them with something they may have never heard before just because they were filtering it out.
Yeah. Talk about it in that direction. I mean, a lot of churches are recognizing the need of reaching unchurched people and the next generation. So how do you think, especially those two, demographics, why is it important, especially for them?
Yeah, I think again, everyone, I mean, we live in such a churched country. Everyone knows what the church is. They know what a Christian is. They know who Jesus was. They don't really, because it's all just been kind of falsely portrayed. But yeah, so I think that a lot of it is just kind of challenging what people think about Jesus and what people have maybe experienced with church. A lot of people expect, when I go into church, I'm going to feel bad about myself. I'm going to feel guilty. I'm going to feel like, they're using terminology that I don't understand, and I'm going to feel like an outsider. And so whenever you can allow people to come inside and say, wow, I understand this space. Like, this relates to me. I feel like I get it. Sure. That's a unique feeling for most people. And creativity, in the world and in culture, creativity is such a big deal. Yeah. Movies are just massively creative. They're very immersive environments, immersive sound. So when you can kind of recreate, the goal is not to be like a rock concert or like a movie theater, but you can use those sometimes as tools for people to say, oh, I get this space. It's not like, I'm not worried someone's going to sacrifice a chicken in the corner and I'm just going to feel, out of place. Yeah. So yeah, that's a huge thing. Creativity, creating welcoming environments, trying to avoid, overly religious. Obviously, we are Christians and we are different than people. But, sometimes I think we use terms that are just unnecessary to use that people don't understand whenever, hey, you could use this and it would actually help people understand the concept a little bit better. So Absolutely. Kind of all that, I think creativity and relevance, all those two, big terms that have been floating around for a while, I think they're vitally important to reaching people. Absolutely. No, I think that's huge. So in terms of stage design, because really environments go, like you said, it starts, and I love Andy Stanley says, it's the sermon starts in the parking lot, and it does. Everything, first impressions, all that stuff happens along the way. Where does stage design land in that, and I think you've maybe answered a little bit of that already, but where specifically is stage design in that process of really creating that experience for people? Yeah, I really see stage design as, it's almost like this new kind of thing. I think stage design in the church started almost more like scenic design, which you'd see in like a play, where we're talking about Faith Pirates is our series or something like that. Sure. And so you put a pirate ship on a stage. And for attractional churches, which I hate that term, but for churches that are really trying to reach the lost, that was a new and cutting edge way to say, oh, this church is so different because they put a pirate ship on their stage, and that really shocked Broca, right? But I think that's changed a little bit, where stage design is not as much about creating a set piece as it is creating an environment. So the idea is that through lighting and projection and kind of these blank spaces that we create, we can actually emotionally mimic what's happening on the stage. So, in worship, whenever we're singing a very deep song and something that's very emotional, we can, get passionate deep blues or maybe red to get a little bit more exciting. We can kind of mirror those feelings. You don't want to sing, Better's One Day in Your Courts with Titanic behind you. That just doesn't really match, right? Yeah. So the goal is to kind of create an environment that kind of encapsulates the message and encapsulates the worship, and that makes people kind of drawn into what's happening in the service. Cool. Yeah, so that's kind of the goal is not necessarily to create an actual environment, but more to create a space, an atmosphere. So, you probably won't put, and you can, there are times to put, a pirate ship on your stage or a big iceberg on your stage. It's really cool. But for the most part, I'd say it's more about creating just a space. Starbucks does that. Starbucks creates a space where you feel like, oh, I'm in this environment or this atmosphere. Abercrombie and Fitch, they create a space. Each one of those is very distinct, very different. And you just get it. You go in there, you're like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to feel right now, and you feel it. Right. So I think that what you're saying is leading to something. Each one of those places has a mission. They're trying to accomplish something. So in the process of really determining, okay, what kind of environments are we going to create? How does
understanding your philosophy, your vision, your mission, your values, how did those really come into play in the way you create an environment?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much context that you need to get because one stage design that might be at a church in Miami, Florida, maybe won't work in your city where it's a little bit smaller. Miami, the whole city changes every year. Like in their, they see holographic stuff, they see all the stuff that's like just high intensity. Whereas a church maybe with older people that is in a smaller city, if you put strobe lights in it, they're all going to have seizures. Like that's not good, right?
Right.
So the goal is to match, first of all, your geography and the type of people you're trying to reach. And a lot of times I think churches say, oh, we want to reach everyone. Well, that's not the case. You're going to reach someone. You're going to reach a segment of the population. So understanding that is first a very vital point in this. But then also figuring out what the point of your church is. If your church is really about discipleship and about, I mean, there are some churches that their goal is to disciple believers. And yes, they're happy whenever unbelievers come in, but that's not necessarily the goal. And I believe you need to stay true to that. That's a vision that God has given your church. So, if you're not really trying to attract the unreached, then, maybe you don't need to go so crazy and so like impressive. Maybe you're just trying to create a nice space that the believers who are there can feel engaged in the service. But if you're trying to reach the unreached, if you're, there are some churches who are reaching the party scene. That's their goal, is to reach those people who are at the club on Saturday nights and probably stumble in a little bit, still hungover. And that's not for every church, but that's some churches. And those you might want to mimic more of a club. The goal is not to make people, oh, I'm at the club so I can get drunk again. The goal is obviously to make people feel, oh, I feel safe here. I feel like I can belong here.
Sure.
So that's kind of the goal, and each church context is different. Some of I think the temptation when you go on church stage design ideas is to see a set and just try to mimic it completely without contextualizing it. And I think that you do a little disservice with your congregation and to the mission of your church.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. And I think that answering that question of why are we doing what we're doing has to come first before, we put resources and time and energy and volunteers into, creating stage designs or whatever it might be. And I think it's valuable for everywhere. I do think in ministries, individually, I'm as a youth pastor, also doing worship and media and things like you. I think it's valuable to think about, okay, well, how does that fit in our environment for teenagers or for kids or any of those kinds of things. But that why is huge. That's got to be answered first.
Yeah.
So that church that's out there right now and they're hearing this or they're thinking about stage design and what do we do and how do we begin, and they're in that place and maybe, specifically, especially that church that just hasn't yet made that leap and they're going, okay, I get the value. We understand the why. It fits with what our mission is and where we're going. How do they begin? Where do they get started?
Yeah, I mean, the first, and you touched on this perfectly, is that you need to realize it's not that important. Like, if you never do stage design, there are some churches that are so modern now that they aren't even doing stage design because, what happens is in the church we get this, we get something new and it breaks the mold and it's this untraditional thing, non-traditional thing, and then all of a sudden it becomes our tradition again because, well, that's just what we do. We do stage design. It's not that important. Right. So first of all, yes, realize your context, and you touched on that wonderfully. But then, you need to realize it's not maybe as expensive as you think. Some of these churches are doing stage designs for like $100 at most, or $50, or they're using materials that they find on the side of the road and doing it for free. Yeah. So I mean, there's so many options available to you. There's actually an ebook on the site that talks about, I think, like 5 starter stage designs that are just really cheap using sprinkled, that's not a word, crumpled up aluminum screening, right. Or and that creates this really cool texture that you can bounce lights off of, or you can use corrugated plastic, which is just that real estate sign material stuff that you can get at a plastics manufacturer or a Home Depot, all over the place. And then there's lumber. There's just a lot of different options. Bubble wrap, some churches have used. Boxes. There are just some really cool, really inexpensive options that then you can point some lights at it, you can do some really cool things. So I kind of start there. Just start with cheap and easy. And I think the biggest deal is just to start, because whenever I did that first stage design, man, we spent way more money than we needed to. Sure. We did it all wrong. It was heavier than it needed to be. And I found that out later. As I started getting stage design submitted to me, and I'm like, man, I didn't know about Coroplast. This stuff's amazing. Sure. But, I started, and if I hadn't have done it, we probably never would have started, just because it feels like a mammoth project, but just take that first step.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely, and that's the other aspect of it is the church needs starters. I mean, the church needs people who are out there going, "Hey, we're going to do something that nobody else is doing," and that's what has brought up in a lot of ways stage design, thinking about it differently than just like you said, set design and creating some artistic thing that way, but utilizing. So you've also I've heard you say you look at stage design as not just, okay, let's do one flash in the pan, put a ton of energy and ton of resources into one single thing, but thinking in terms of how is this, portable? How is this reusable? How is this something that can really fit in, multiple places, rather than just one single week and then we're done kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So maybe talk to that a little bit. How do you think in those kinds of terms rather than, okay, I got one picture and I'm just going to make this picture happen, but thinking in a broader picture?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to budgeting, I always try to budget for things that are, if I have a $200, which is a huge budget for most people, I understand that. But, if I have $200, I'm going to look for materials that I can reuse in future sets. So for me, actually, if I had $200, I would probably buy one light and then spend maybe $50 on the rest of the stuff, or, maybe spend no money and just kind of save up that $200 for the next $200 to buy one light. Mm-hmm. And I would do it that way because, lighting is very versatile, very adaptable. You can do so much with lighting. Whereas, I don't need to spend $200 on materials that I could probably find for free or get donated from someone. Mm-hmm. So as much as possible, I look for, if I'm buying a piece of coroplast, I don't cut it up too much, or maybe my first stage design, I'll do it without cutting it. Then the next one, I'll cut it up in half. The next one, I'll cut it up in fourths, and just start kind of slowly using the material in different ways. There are tons of materials that are durable, that are reusable, that are inexpensive, and that's what I would go for first. And then look for things like lighting or projection that you can really reuse and really enhance the overall kind of trajectory of the church and of your creative arts department.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for that person, I'm just thinking about that. The creative person who's out there going, man, I got to do this for my church. How do they approach the subject? I mean, especially maybe in a more necessarily traditional church. I don't think, churches with pipe organs are always going to be jumping on, stage design or whatever. It can happen. But, someone in a place where it just hasn't been done and they aren't necessarily the person who's getting to make the decisions or running the budget. How do they approach, this concept and helping the church, see the value of where they're going? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that a lot of people haven't seen this. Mm-hmm. So the first thing is just showing it to someone. That's with anything creative you want to do. If you could take someone to a conference or if you can show them a video of something and just point out what makes that good or what value that will add to the church. It's so easy to think, I think a lot of people approach this way in the church. They approach creativity as it's something we have to do because the big church down the street's doing it. Right. And that is never going to convince a leader to do that because they are not that big church and they shouldn't be that big church. If they are, then they're not being unique to who God created them to be. So the idea is, hey, by doing this, we can create a more impacting environment for people. And I mean, most people, I think I heard a guy who was trying to convince a church to start getting on Facebook, and it was an older generation, all gray hairs. And he said, he was just thinking, it's so important, it's so important, it's so important. They were just, totally resistant to it. Mm-hmm. Then all of a sudden he said, hey, how would you like to reach your grandchildren? And one person said, oh, I would love to reach my grandchildren. I don't know how to reach them. And he says, well, where are your grandchildren? Well, I think they're on Facebook. So he says, that's how you're going to reach them, by being there. And all of a sudden that came alive to them because it was something that really matched what their goal was. So find what your leader's goal is, and if it doesn't match that, then you probably don't need to be pushing it. But my guess is there's probably a way that stage design or creativity matches with that goal, and that's the best way to approach it.
Oh, that's good. And you're reiterating something I've heard in another conversation, is that ask the right questions rather than force the issue, especially as a young person coming into, older leaders and people with more experience, just to say, okay, so what are we trying to accomplish and could this possibly fit, and all those kinds of things. So that's really helpful, definitely beneficial. So there's that young creative person out there who's going, man, I love light stuff and I love going to the rock shows and seeing the and do we even call it rock shows anymore? I don't, you know, I feel like I'm dated by saying that. But I love going to those venues and those things that are happening that, there's this creative stuff and there's environments and I have ideas and I have thoughts and all that kind of stuff, but I don't see how that could fit in the church, and there's that creative person going, how can I use my gifts? What would you say to that young person who's struggling to see where they fit, in the kingdom process in the local church?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just, really the best way to get your feet wet in the church if you're super creative is through youth ministry. Mm-hmm. Because that's where, and it's funny, we kind of a story of my church is we were modernizing and trying to become more seeker sensitive or whatever you want to, whatever the popular term was at the time. Right. And we also had this young adults ministry that was going even more that direction. Mm-hmm. And so our pastor said, frankly, if that young adults ministry is successful, we might start looking a little bit more like them because we realize they're doing what's successful. So, if you make your youth ministry successful and if it's reaching people and if it's obviously not, your goal is not to create your own church. Right. That's never your goal. But your goal is to be effective and to be submissive to authority. If you're able to create something successful in this small area, a lot of times leaders will see that and say, hey, we'd love to incorporate that into here. Yeah. People love success, as long as it's not threatening success. If it's like, right. Oh, we're building our own kingdom and we're not encouraging them to get involved in the service and we're taking them away on weekend trips away from church. Right. That's probably not going to garner any favor with your leadership. But that's probably the best way is in youth. I think youth are some of the most exciting people out there because there's just this raw energy that if you can channel it the right way, it's just unstoppable. If you don't channel it the right way, it can be very destructive. But youth are phenomenal.
That's good. So what are you as a creative leader, what are you doing to learn? What are you doing to move forward? What your knowledge, your experience, all that kind of thing. What are you doing?
I definitely do a lot of conferences. I love conferences, love reading blogs. Frankly, I get this strange benefit of through my websites kind of getting to see just so much of what's out in the church through seriesideas.com, worshipsetideas.com, churchstagedesignIdeas.com. I see so many different things that different churches are doing. Some people are traditional, so they're going this route. Some people are postmodern liturgical, so they're going this route. Some people are, and you get to see all these different manifestations of what people are doing in the church. And I think that's one of the best ways to really kind of stretch your creative muscle. A lot of people will we follow Fellowship Church. We follow Church on the Move, or we follow Willow Creek, and they kind of follow one stream. So they kind of end up mimicking that stream completely. But the more you can expose yourself to different churches that, maybe believe differently than you, and it's scary, but they're doing things differently and they're fully in line with their vision. Right. You can start seeing, oh man, I get a glimpse into what's available, what's possible. Obviously that won't work for us, but what can I learn from that still? Just kind of consuming what other churches are doing, not to copy, but to get inspired and to see, man, these guys are pushing the envelope. We can't do that, but we might be able to do this. Yeah. So that's what I would recommend the most. And then also just feeding different parts of your creativity, like don't just follow churches. If you're a graphic designer, follow typography designers, follow photographers that are really pushing the envelope in different industries. And a lot of times those same, and it's in Creative for More, kind of this topic that, some of the same disciplines or same rules that work in one industry will actually work well in another industry that no one's ever applied those to. Sure. I think the video camera, the movie was created based on the phonograph, based on the record player, because what the phonograph did for your ears, the movie could do for your eyes. Gotcha. So a lot of times thinking parallel like that is kind of a really cool way to be creative. Absolutely. Yeah, and being out there, reading these things and visiting these conferences, what are you seeing in the church? Where is the church headed? Where is it going? What's next? That's a big question to ask, and of course none of us know. But what would you say? What's out there next in the church? Because some of us are going, okay, I want to be creative in stage design, but maybe there's even something else that's out there on the edge that would be good to be paying attention to. Yeah, I think really the church is going 50,000 different directions, and I'm excited about that. Yeah. Because, there's some churches that are getting away from all the stage design, all the visual media, all the glitz and glamour of megachurch, and they're going liturgy, which is like, what? Didn't we just get out of that?
Right.
But for a lot of people, that's touching a really deep part that they've kind of missed out on. They feel like, wow, I'm connected to this huge history of church that I didn't even realize existed.
Sure.
So there's that. Then there's still the megachurch model where they're being creative, they're always pushing the envelope, and that's one way to do it. Then there's the kind of community churches, which are really focusing on, hey, we're gonna open a coffee shop, and that's what we're gonna focus on, and then we're gonna meet in the coffee shop on Sundays, but we really want to reach our community. So there's a lot of different things, and I don't know that one or the other is necessarily gonna be bigger than the other. There's the multi-church model, there's the multi-campus video venue, there's which I think I'm excited about holograms getting involved there.
Yeah,
That'll be
I've
fun
seen that.
in the future.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, there's just a lot of different things, and you just got to be true to what God called you to do. I know I've heard of some churches trying to join that multi-movement or multi-church model, and it's just not the DNA of their pastor, so they just waste a lot of time and money on it, and it just never really takes off because it's not who they are.
Right.
So
But
that probably didn't answer your question at all.
no,
but
no, it
hopefully
does.
did.
I mean, and that there's no perfect answer, but I think you're right. It is that there's so many places the church is going, and I think that's a good thing because we're reaching different people, and we need to be reaching different people. For so long, we've kind of reached that percentage, that like 10, 11% of the population, and we've got to be going different directions. We've got to be doing things that no one's ever done to reach people that no one's ever reached, and so that's one of the reasons why I love stage design and creative environments, and what you're doing, what you're sharing out there, and really just appreciate your time. So let us know, how can we follow you? How can we stay connected? How can we keep learning from what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. It's just Jonathan Malm on all of those.
Great.
Love connecting with people there. There's just the sites, Church Stages and Ideas. SundayMagazine.tv is one that I didn't mention, but it's a free online magazine that's really all about the creative process of Sunday mornings or the weekends, whatever you do. So I recommend doing that. You have some of the leading voices in church creativity that are contributing to it. And yeah, and then I'm just around. You can pick up my book if you want. There's Created for More and then Unwelcome. Both of those are available on Amazon or iBooks or I think Barnes and Noble, if anyone goes there. So, but yeah, that's kind of the way to keep up with me. And I encourage you, please definitely connect with me. I don't mind having new friends on Facebook.
Definitely. Well, and we appreciate you keeping your finger on the pulse of, the church and creativity there, because I think there's a generation of creatives who maybe haven't seen their place in the church, and by opening up these opportunities and these possibilities, they're now seeing, man, I could actually contribute. I could actually do what I love to do or what I'm created for, and so that's really exciting. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being
definitely
willing to share with us today, and look forward to seeing the books and the content that continues to come from your direction. So appreciate it. We'll go ahead and wrap up the interview then this way. Cool?
Yeah.
Thanks, man. So that was our interview with Jonathan Malm. As you can see, he's a really great guy, really down to earth, and had some very helpful insights for us as we continue to craft creative environments in our churches. We had a great conversation after we finished the video for another half hour or so, and just really love his heart for the church and his desire to see us create relevant environments. So keep learning from the guy. Check out his different websites and follow him there. Feel free to pass along this video to anybody you know who might benefit from it.